Milkmen, wrong addresses, and an inept police force all form the story in the latest episode of Unsolved British Crimes. So sit back, buckle up, and let's see if you can figure out who committed the crime in this case. In this latest episode, we look at the story of William Wallace and the Non-Existent road. Not William Wallace of Scotland, but William Wallace of Anfield, Liverpool. The story begins on Monday the 19th of January 1931 when William Wallace headed to his chess club at the City Cafe. He arrived around 7:45 p.m. as he was scheduled to play a tournament match that evening. But before he could settle, the captain of the club approached to inform him that 20 minutes before his arrival there had been a phone call for him, and Mr. R.M. Qualtrough asked him to see him the following evening at 7:30 at 25 Menlove Gardens East to discuss an insurance policy. Wallace had never heard the name Qualtrough before, and when he wrote the address in his notebook, he put down 25 Menlove Gardens West before correcting it and writing East. On the day of the murder, Wallace did his rounds as usual, and when later quizzed about it, his clients claimed that he was his normal, calm and pleasant self, arriving home just after 6 p.m, having been delayed slightly by drinking tea with a client. According to Wallace, he left the house via the back door that evening for his appointment with Qualtrough at around 6:45 p.m. Wallace set off from his home in Warburton Street, Anfield, and he searched for the non-existent street. Although there is a Menlove Gardens north, south and west, there is no east. Wallace, presumably thinking that some sort of mistake had been made, knocked on 25 Menlove Gardens West. He then asked a bobby on the beat who stated that he was certain no such address existed. It suddenly started to dawn on him that the whole appointment had been a prank. He made his way back to Anfield. When Wallace arrived back at Warburton Street, he was unable to open the front door to his house. It was doused in complete darkness. He tried the back door and was equally unsuccessful. His neighbours, the Johnsons, who were out for their evening walk, saw Wallace struggling. Wallace asked them if they'd heard anything that evening. They said they hadn't, and Wallace then opened the back door, seemingly without much difficulty. The Johnsons offered to wait for him as he made sure everything was okay. After at least a minute, he reappeared, saying to them, "Come and see, they've killed her." Mr. Johnson went to get a police officer. Mrs. Johnson made Wallace a much-needed cup of tea. Very, very British. Wallace then broke down and wept. The first officer on the scene noticed that Julia's body was still slightly warm. He also spotted a blood-drenched Macintosh stuck underneath Julia's body. It had been badly burned. Wallace had already told Mrs. Johnson that it belonged to him. In the bathroom upstairs, only a nail brush showed signs of recent use. The toilet and the taps hadn't been used that evening. The towels were also dry. If the murderer cleaned themselves inside the house, then they'd done so in an ingenious way. Back on Warburton Street, there was some indication that it had been a robbery gone wrong. Wallace confirmed that £4 were missing from his cash box, which had mysteriously been put back neatly in the cabinet in the cupboard. However, there was a £1 note, one of which had a bloodstain on it, in a glass jar upstairs, and money and silver in Julia's bag remained untouched. The house was undamaged, apart from the smashed door of the cabinet in the kitchen. There was no sign of forced entry. The first police pathologist to arrive at the scene, John McFall, checked the body for the progress of rigor mortis. One of two options then for checking the time of death. The other would have been to check the temperature of the body. McFall predicted that the time of death to have been around 8 p.m. However, this was changed when the official police surgeon estimated it around 6 p.m. But he too only checked for rigor mortis, which was the less favourable of the two. Wallace was immediately treated as a suspect. He was taken to the police headquarters on Dale Street to make a formal statement, and his clothes were checked for any sign of blood. They didn't find a single drop. There was also very little blood found inside the parlour, except a small clot on the rim of the lavatory pan. After his statement, Wallace was keen to return home, something the police refused, instead sending him to his sister-in-law on Ullett Road. It was soon discovered that Qualtrough call of January 19th was made from a phone box only 400 yards from Wallace's home. The police concluded that Wallace and Qualtrough were one and the same. A key witness came forward the day after the murder, the local milk boy, Alan Close. Now, this is where it gets complicated. Close claimed to have seen Julia alive after 6:30, no later than 6:45. This was corroborated by witnesses. So if Julia had been alive at 6:45 and Wallace got on the first tram at 6 minutes past 7, that would have left Wallace with just 21 minutes to commit the crime, sort the house out, and make his way to the first tram stop, a third of a mile away. Wallace would have likely only have had around a 4-minute window to have killed Julia and leave the house. He was described as a slow mover by colleagues due to a kidney condition. He'd had one removed and it still caused him problems. It's believed that the police thought Close was either lying, which seems to be impossible considering witnesses saw him on Wolverton Street, or they thought he had spoken to William, who had donned a dress and disguised his voice to trick Close into thinking he was his murdered wife. Could they really have been that dumb and inept? The police thought Wallace did the murder in the nude, wearing the Macintosh. No murder weapon was ever found, although a maid who helped Julia with the cleaning occasionally stated a fire poker was missing. Wallace denied this. He was arrested on the 2nd of February 1931. The trial began on the 22nd of April. The Prudential Staff Union held their own mock trial in Holborn, London. They unanimously found Wallace innocent and agreed to pay for his defence. The evidence against Wallace was entirely circumstantial, and the feeling amongst his defence was generally optimistic. However, the jury had been picked from towns just outside Liverpool, and the local newspapers had been against Wallace from the start, having been briefed by the police. The judge summing up the case clearly favoured an acquittal. He described the killing as almost unexampled in the annals of crime. The jury deliberated for an hour before finding Wallace guilty. He was sentenced to death. Taken to Walton Jail, he was given his violin and chess set. In the awesome but yet unfinished Anglican Cathedral, there was a special service praying for divine judgment to be performed and for Wallace to be saved. The case was taken to the Court of Criminal Appeal in London. God listened. The conviction was quashed. He wrote in his diary, "I have been depressed thinking of my dear Julia. I'm afraid this will be a very lonely winter for me. I seem to miss her more and more, and cannot drive the thought of her cruel end out of my mind." On the 26th of February 1933, Wallace died of the kidney complaint which had tormented him since his youth. He is buried next to Julia in Anfield Cemetery, meaning if he really did kill her, she had been sentenced to an eternity of indignance. An ex-colleague of Wallace's, Richard Gordon Parry, a 22-year-old who Wallace had got sacked from the Prudential, was also put in the frame. So the case remains unsolved and has been the subject of a number of books and a film, The Man from the Prue. But who really killed Julia? Please like and subscribe to the channel so you know whenever new episodes are available. Thank you for listening.